Hey everyone, my name is Paul, founder of Adopt and Embrace. Welcome to the Adopt and Embrace YouTube channel, and a very belated next edition of the live read of Adopt and Embrace Microsoft Teams, a manager's guide to communication, collaboration, and coordination with Microsoft Teams. As some of you who subscribe to the channel would know, over the past couple of months, I've been going through the book, reading 1 or 2 chapters at a time, just to give everyone some insights into the content of the book, some sidebar stories or interesting stories about when we wrote the book, or the use cases we're exploring, that kind of thing, or anything that's changed since we wrote the book, which happened to be published in about 2019. As always, if you're interested in the content or interested in the book, a lot of people found a lot of great value of just grabbing a copy of the paperback like this one from Amazon or Book Depository or wherever, and taking notes in the margins as we kind of read through the book. If you love audiobooks and you want a higher quality production than this one, where you're not going to hear dogs barking in the background and other bits and pieces like that, head on over to Audible or your favorite audiobook provider, and you'll find a very well narrated version of this there. But for us now, all we're going to do is basically just do a nice informal read of 2 chapters of Adopt and Embrace Microsoft Teams. The provisioning chapter, which is the second last P of the 10 Ps that we talk about, and Perishability, which is the last chapter of part 2. Just a bit of an apology, I guess, for the delay and the new content coming out. I've moved home in the past month or so no longer stuck in the garage doing these live reads. So again, production quality is improving a little bit, I guess. No more a wind coming in through the garage door and all that kind of stuff. But we'll see how we go with this one. Hopefully it's good. For those of you that are joining live, feel free to engage in the live chat. I see a couple of people have joined already. If you're watching this on replay, feel free to drop your comments into the comments, and we can respond to you, any questions that you have as we go, as we kind of you read the content or watch the content over the next couple of years. We'll make sure we respond to you as well. So with that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to dive into the provisioning chapter, which is the next one. This one here, when it comes to thinking about Microsoft Teams, when we talk to technologists, this is something that they're really focused on, is how do we provision Teams to our organization? And we're not talking about putting the software onto the desktop or software onto your mobile phone. That's normally taken care of through the management systems that you have in place to get the software out there. This is more about provisioning. So when is the right time to create a team, and what processes or governance should we put in place around when people can create teams or when people shouldn't be able to create teams? Should IT be creating the teams for the business and vice versa? So lots of interesting things we can talk about in provisioning. And the second chapter we'll talk about today, perishability, it's really all about what do we do when we're finished with the team? What do we do with that knowledge or information that we've captured? How do we make sure we repurpose that or share that, or make sure it's captured in a records management system? Those kinds of things. So pretty interesting chapters in terms of the minutiae of how to make teams work really well in your organization. So with that, I'm going to kick off with the provisioning chapter, and we'll see how we go. Provisioning. We are sorry to say that this part of the 10 Ps may be the most frustrating for you, or maybe your favorite aspect of getting your team up and running on Microsoft Teams, depending on which organization you work for. Provisioning is one area where we consistently see inconsistency across our customers. In some organizations, you will have complete control of what teams you create, when you create them, and how you manage them to achieve your business objectives. You are trusted to create your own collaboration and coordination spaces, just like you create your own Word documents and Excel spreadsheets. Your information technology team is just delivering you as a service, and as a subject matter expert in your area, you're empowered to use that service as you see fit to help you achieve your goals. In other organizations, to get a team created, you might have to fill in an e-form, get approval from your manager, then sacrifice your firstborn child to someone in IT before they deem your request worthy of a team. Structures are put in place to restrict or even discourage you from creating a team. In fact, in one example, we saw an IT team put a convoluted request and approval process in place simply so they could cross-charge a business unit for delivering the service. Processes like this, while annoying and universal in their ability to slow things down, just when you have the momentum and want to start things yesterday, are workable if you understand the process and timeframes involved. However, if you are in the unlucky minority, even sacrificing 2 children, sending a gift basket, and organizing 4 tickets for the game on Friday night to Brad at the service desk may not be enough. In some organizations, your IT team may have established a position to lock down team and therefore Office 365 or Microsoft 365 group creation to such a degree that no matter how many favors you ask of your CIO, you simply won't be able to create a team. For those of you working in organizations with this significant or overreaching governance in place, while this chapter may not be as relevant today, the ideas we discuss over the next few pages may help you start a conversation with your IT team to reach a more pragmatic or business outcome-focused position. Generally, lock everything down is the default response when a new technology and its business application are not widely or entirely understood. And guess what? You can help your IT team gain that understanding. Armed with examples and specific ideas of how you want to use Microsoft Teams, all detailed using the 10 Ps framework, you may find that your IT team will loosen up some of the restrictions on self-service or demand-led creation of collaboration and coordination spaces using Microsoft Teams. For those of you who create teams today, for those of you who can create teams today, breathe a sigh of relief. Seriously though, this chapter will introduce you to some advanced provisioning ideas you may not be aware of, which may transform how you think about the role Microsoft Teams plays in project or committee initiation, emergency management or disaster recovery, and any other scenario where you may use similar team structures across your organization. Ironically, it will mean that you might want to work with IT to make this work for you. This time, however, it probably will not require any type of ritualistic sacrifice. Just a quick comment on that before I get into the rest of the chapter here as well. So one of the things that really causes, or maybe the root cause of a lot of the hesitation of IT teams to open up teams to a lot of people in the organization is maybe the risk or the fear of something that people call team sprawl. And that's basically having way too many teams to manage, or a significant number of teams to have to manage. And there's a lot of IT folk that we talked about there that have a fear of having too many teams because it's something it makes it difficult them to put the right controls in place or manage risk associated with having all these different teams available in the organization. They have a fear when they see all the Microsoft 365 groups created in the background with all those different teams, filling up the Azure Active Directory and seeing these as objects that they need to manage or things they need to manage in their organization. Just yesterday, actually, I was talking to a customer, and they talked about, at first they opened up teams to everyone, and everyone could create whatever team they wanted. And then at the moment, they've got 452 teams with test or some derivative of test in the name of it. So a lot of these fears that IT people have are actually rational fears. Like they're things that, in terms of wanting to run a well-managed environment, or well-managed teams environment, that you absolutely need to consider. So in the rest of this chapter, what we're going to focus on is thinking about some of the different ways we can think about that spectrum of laissez-faire, everyone in the organization can create whatever they want, to the completely draconian IT will only ever deploy a team or provision a team, and it's the teams that the IT decides. And what we'll probably find as we go through this process and talk about the different options is you'll find a nice sweet spot somewhere in the middle of that. Laissez-faire can work, but with some simple controls or guide rails or bumper bowling in place, you're going to get a really great outcome without having to go to the full extent of locking everything down as well. So hopefully that'll come out in the conversation today. So what is provisioning? Simply put, provisioning is the process of setting up your Microsoft Teams team. In smaller organizations, provisioning may simply mean click on join or create a team, then follow the bouncing ball through the new team creation process. In larger organizations, there may be rules, policies, and architectural decisions that mean it may not be as simple as just a few clicks. Let's break provisioning down into 4 broad buckets. There's doing it yourself, receiving assistance from the IT team, using templates, or automating what goes into your team. Let's talk about creating a team, doing it yourself. Assuming you work in an organization that has empowered you to create your own teams, creating a team is relatively simple. Step 1, open up Microsoft Teams. Step 2, click on Join or Create a Team. Step 3, click on Create a Team. Step 4, click on Build a Team from scratch. Step 5, select the type of team that it will be, either private or public. Step 6, give your team a name and a description. Step 7, add members to the team. Step 8, add some channels. Step 9, get to work. Wait, hold on a minute. You didn't just go and create a team, did you? Yes, it is simple to create a team. However, before you dive in and create your team, you should spend a few minutes thinking about your team. Use a 10 Ps framework, which we discuss in this book, to guide you through your thought process. Problem. Are we solving a problem by creating this team? If not, we probably don't need to create it. 2, purpose. Do we have a clear purpose? If so, does the name of this team make that purpose clear? People. Who do we need in this team? Are there subsets of people, which mean we should break this into different teams or use private channels? Will there be guests from outside of our organization? Priorities. What are the 3 to 7 things we're going to focus on in this team? Do they map nicely to channels? 5, principles. How are we going to agree and use this team? Agree to use this team? What does a like or a mention mean? Plugins. What are the third-party applications or websites we might want to include in the team so we don't need to switch to other windows all the time? Permissions. Who should be able to do what in this team? Should it be private or should we encourage others to join? Performance. What does success look like? Provisioning. This is kind of meta. Let's assume you're creating it yourself for now. Perishability. How long will this team last? What will we do when we are finished with it? Once you've considered all these factors and are comfortable that the design of your new team will meet your collaboration and coordination needs, then go ahead and start creating. Remember that just because you have the power to create teams, it doesn't mean you should create as many teams as possible. Use the 10 Ps framework to determine what teams you should create and how you should set them up. Documenting your answers to each of the 10 Ps before you start will enable you to create collaboration and coordination spaces in Microsoft Teams that are fit for purpose and don't raise suspicion or eyebrows from IT, who deep down fear having to clean up team sprawl or the mess that you could potentially make by having too many teams for your particular project, initiative, tests, whatever it is. So let's talk about the second bucket, I guess, in terms of provisioning, which is getting assistance from the IT team. Many of you reading this book will only be able to create a team through a process established by your IT team. Despite the slight sarcasm earlier in this chapter, we understand that organizations have some good reasons for putting a small level of governance around the team creation and provisioning process. Usually it's to ensure that duplicate teams are minimized as much as possible. Only people in the marketing team create teams that have the word marketing in their name. Teams which have external guests always have the preface EXT or external in brackets at the start of the team name. Discovering related teams is easier. There's always 2 group owners just in case one of you moves on, and they can cross-charge your business unit, which actually isn't a really good reason at all. But again, we've come across it before. In every organization, the process will be slightly different. You can expect to provide some information about the team you want prior to it being created for you by the IT team. Try to be as descriptive as possible when filling in the form, however it's presented to you when you apply to set up your team in Microsoft Teams. You can use your responses to each of the 10 Ps to help the service desk or your manager, if they need to approve your request, to understand what you're trying to achieve. Depending on how things are set up, the creation of the team could still happen instantly if your organization uses some special Microsoft Teams governance or provisioning software, or it may need a review by someone in IT. In most cases, the process should only take a day or 2 maximum. However, if you know that process takes a little bit longer in your organization, make sure you plan ahead and request your team earlier than you need it. The third bucket we're going to look at is creating a team using templates. And this is one area where, since we wrote the book, there's been a bit of an improvement in the way that Microsoft Teams handles templates. You may have noticed when you go and create a team now, there may be in your organization a library of different templates you can select when you create the team. So maybe a template for a project, template for a team just for general collaboration, a team for running a class if you're in the education space, things like that. And these templates come with kind of predefined channels and sometimes some tabs that help you get started quickly with a design for your team. Now, these templates are probably a good starting point if you don't want to put too much thought into how you create your team and your structure. You don't want to go through the 10 Ps and kind of get that refined view of it. If you want to have really nuanced, fine-grained control about how you design, how collaboration is going to occur in your team, probably steer clear of the out-of-the-box templates to start with. They're really great generalization of how work occurs across lots of different organizations around the world. But they may not match exactly to the kind of collaboration experience you want to create in your project or in your team as well. So good place to start, but maybe you may move past them quickly. That being said, what we can do is once you are really confident with the design of a team, say you're a project management office and you want to have a pretty consistent structure to how you structure your project-based teams in Microsoft Teams, you have the opportunity to take that pattern or that secret source of a design that you have for your organization and have that deployed as a template that could be used by others and reused by others across your organization as well. So being able to create your own templates is a really interesting thing, and that's what we're going to talk about in the book right now. So if your team has already worked with others in your organization, they may have created several templates to help get started with Microsoft Teams. For example, if you want to create a team to manage a formal committee meeting, there may already be an approved team template developed by your executive support officers, governance team, or company secretary that meets your compliance requirements and includes the appropriate channels so you can get started straight away. Another example could be a template that includes all the channels aligned to your project management methodology approved by your project management office. Generally, templates will only be available via an IT-assisted provisioning process. That being said, that's changed a little bit since we wrote the book. Now we have a library of templates generally will start to appear when you try and create a team automatically. They may be displayed as options on your team's request form, or you may need to call your service desk directly to see what templates are available. If in doubt, get in touch with IT to discuss it. If you have created a team and you want to create another that is similar, it might be a good candidate to turn into a template and make available to others in your organization. If so, make sure you bring it to the attention of your IT team. You can not only save yourself time, but also make the lessons you have learned available to others in your organization. Creating a team, automating what goes into your team. This is probably the most interesting, I think, from our point of view, but probably the least used provisioning option that we've seen across Microsoft Teams. This works really well if you've got really clear, repeatable processes, really clear, a structured work practice or process around how you want to do things. There's a few examples I can think of I'll talk about as we go through this bit of the book as well. So automating what goes into your team. If you're a member of a project management office and regularly work on projects, run a bid management team, or have a high volume of teams that are consistent, for example, a team for every class in your university, this approach to provisioning will excite you. Imagine a world where when your project was approved, you kicked off your bid, or when a class was finalized at the start of the semester and a collaboration and coordination space was created for you in Microsoft Teams automatically, without having to ask someone for it. Then imagine if that team was named clearly to demonstrate the purpose of the team, was built with the right channels in place per your regular team template, was populated with all the project initiation documents, your tender response templates or course overview documents, using data from your project approval, customer relationship management, or student management systems, had the right people added with the right owner and member permissions, and all that happening just within a few seconds after the approval to start on the project or when the work or bid was given. Now, this isn't something that most people reading this book will be able to do themselves. However, it's important to know that it's possible. If there is repeatability in your work and you're currently spending hours a week creating documentation and setting up teams to meet your needs, we encourage you to have a discussion with your IT team. They may be able to assist you in automating some or all of these processes. Just ask them this one question. I'm interested in automating some of our team creation processes. I've heard of something called the Graph API, which we could use to automate the setup of our teams. We could then use a Power Automate or a Flow, or potentially even Azure Runbook to put the right documents into the right channels. Who can I talk to about this? If your IT team doesn't have the expertise internally, but makes financial sense for you to automate team creation, you could potentially work with a Microsoft partner and your IT team to make it a possibility. Now, a real-world example of where this could come in quite handy, and we've had an interesting last 12 months, obviously, around the world, or 14 months around the world, with the COVID and pandemic response and things like that. One of the examples we're thinking of as we wrote this book is around business continuity planning or business continuity responses or emergency responses in organizations. So how do we bring our first responders in our organization who are responsible for putting our business continuity plans into action when these things come along? How do we create a space quickly for them to do that? So you might have a process which is well documented about how we declare an incident in our business continuity framework. And then when you hit approve, what if we could create a space where we brought all those key stakeholders together automatically? We put the information about the incident into a space. They could start collaborating, coordinating with a version of our business continuity plan already injected into that space as well. So there's really interesting things you can take in existing processes in your business, and then connect them up with the ability to kind of bring people together using a team to do that. And then when the incident is complete, obviously you could archive that if you need to for records management purposes, or delete it. Again, that's something we'll talk about in the provisioning chapter in a second, in the perishability chapter in a second, sorry. So this was one example. Another example, imagine you're working at an airline, and you have a crew for a flight that comes together maybe once every now and then, because there's always changing crews and things like that. So you want to create a space for the team members on that particular flight to have a space to collaborate and coordinate in the lead up to, during, and after that flight. Taking data from your flight scheduling system or dispatch system, and then having a team created 3 hours before that flight takes place, so people can share information about weather they saw en route, that kind of give feedback to the meteorologists, talk about passenger loads or important things that we need to think about in terms of serving our passengers on this flight, catering, all those kinds of things. And creating a team just for that flight, and then disbanding that team at the end of it. That's all stuff we can do with this kind of automation. So you have a think about those different processes in your business where you need that short, sharp, impactful collaboration, bring people together thing to happen. And then you've probably got a whole list of ideas about how you could use that automated provisioning. The key thing with all that, though, is you need to be really clear about the process first, because you're basically templating and structuring a design of a team into that process as well. So you need to be conscious of that first. So what is the best provisioning approach? Simple. The best provisioning approach is one that takes you the least amount of time, considering the rules and policies that have been put in place by your IT team. For ad hoc or reasonably unique use cases, creating your team yourself or using IT-assisted processes, an IT-assisted process, if it exists in your organization, is the way to go. If you're going to create multiple teams with very similar structures, start out by creating them yourself. Test them in the real world in real situations. Only once you have created your first few teams and are comfortable with the naming approach, the channel structure, etc., should you consider starting to template or automate. The upside of templates automation is huge, but it's only huge if you are templating or automating the right things. Start slow, get it right, then start working with your IT team or Microsoft partner to engineer the perfect Teams provisioning process for you. So the key takeaways from this chapter, don't just create a team, have a think about what you want to create first, using the 10 Ps framework as a guide, and obviously we've got that all through the book to help you manage that. Make sure you understand the specific provisioning process for your organization, as every IT team treats provisioning a little bit differently. If you're thinking about automation, take it slow. Get your team design and structure right before templating and automating team creation. In our end of chapter checklist, document how you'll provision your team in your 10 Ps workbook. For those of you who haven't downloaded that, go to teamsbook.info, which is the site for the book. Click on the resources button at the top of the page, and you'll find a link on that page to the 10 Ps workbook, which is a PDF you can download and kind of work up your design of your team using pen and paper, if you like. Then create your team using the method most appropriate for your organization. Either do it yourself or IT assisted. Put it into practice, and then decide if it makes sense to template or automate first. So very long story short for that chapter, design the team really well. If you tried it a few times, you get a bit of feedback from your team in terms of how they engage in the space. And if you think that's a good repeatable pattern for yourself or others in the business, that's the time to start thinking about templating as well. So just bear with me one moment. I'm just going to mute my microphone because my voice is starting to go. There we go. Have a drink of water as well. Way too much talking today. Did a presentation earlier this morning. I think my voice is starting to go. All right, so now we're going to get on to the last chapter of part 2, which is perishability. Now, if you've read the original, I'm trying to think of the right word. The original few chapters of the book, or the first part of the book, you'll know the story behind the perishability chapter. And that was originally that we didn't really think, we kind of had 3 Ps to start with. And they were problem, purpose, and people, like having the right people in the team, that kind of thing, how to structure the right team in terms of do we need to create 1 team or 2 teams or things like that. Then over time, we added more Ps to it. So we had priorities for the different channels and the structure you'd have in the team and things like that as well, and so on and so forth. And then we got to 9 Ps, and like that last chapter we just did, provisioning, that was originally the last P. So we had 9 Ps, and we thought, oh, we should really just have a round number. We should make it 10 Ps. But what's another thing we could have in here that starts with P that we could talk about to kind of bulk out the framework? Like, to be honest, that's kind of where the idea came from. And then we just started searching for a word that started with P that we thought related to the whole idea of designing the perfect team. Now, that's a really transparent but really horrible reason to think about something like this in terms of putting this together. But that process actually led us to product what I think is the most important P out of all of them, which is perishability. And it's something that not very many people think about when they're creating a team up front or designing a team up front. But as we've found time and time again, when we've been working with customers, it's such an important question to ask. What are we going to do with this team when we're finished with it? Or when do we know when we're finished with the team? What are the rules and responsibilities we place on people when it comes to decommissioning a team or archiving a team or deleting a team? Like, what happens in that situation? The reason why we have lots of, you think about SharePoint, lots of SharePoint sprawl across organizations is we haven't really thought about this question in the SharePoint world. And as we layer in teams on top of SharePoint and the potential sprawl that we have there, it's really important to focus on this idea of perishability and making sure people are aware of their responsibilities. And we actually actively manage that information over time. It's interesting, we have conversations with customers, and if you have the IT folk in the room or the records folk in the room, they're very much focused on having as much information as possible kind of archived or added into the kept in the organization. If we have lawyers in that conversation, they generally say get rid of as much information as possible as quickly as possible, as long as we're meeting our specific requirements in terms of information retention, age, and things like that. If we need to keep this information for 7 years, if it's 7 years and 1 day, get rid of it, those kinds of things. So these conversations are really important. In some organizations, there's lots of compliance rules around this. So make sure you're having this conversation with others in your business. You're just not making the decision by yourself. But what we'll talk about perishability now. It's not just about information retention and document management or records management. It's also how do we make the most out of the information and the knowledge that we've captured in that team as well. All right, perishability. And by the way, this chapter was put together by Helen from our team. So a lot of the stories from her are in this chapter too. Perishability. When you're dealing with a team this size, it's like herding cats, said the Royal Australian Navy captain, standing at the front of a packed lecture theatre. Around him, sitting or standing wherever there was room, were men and women, officers and sailors from around the world. They had come to listen to the final and most critical phase, the debrief, of one of Australian Navy's important exercises of the year, Exercise Pacific Reach. It was 2007, and I, Helen, was a lieutenant commander sitting in that audience. To my right was one of my peers, senior to me, who had many years of operational experience. To my left was a lieutenant from the Italian Navy, who during the exercise had become a good friend, possibly because I heartily exclaimed, "Una fascia, una razza," in the ship's wardroom one night to explain the exercise that we were all in. One face, one race. That's what teamwork is about. Exercise Pacific Reach is an international Navy exercise held every 3 years that tests the skills and capabilities of submarine escape and rescue. For 1 week, differences are set aside and participating navies collaborate on and coordinate simulated operations for searching and finding missing submarines and for rescuing the personnel that may be trapped within them. I had submitted my leave from my corporate job as a learning and development consultant in a large bank to participate in the exercise in Perth, Western Australia, as a public relations officer. For the week of the seagoing phase of the exercise, my role involved daily briefings at the Exercise Command headquarters to understand the various activities during the day and night that involved helicopter, ship, or submarine movements. It was my responsibility to work with and escort the news media teams and get them out to the various activities at sea so they could capture the best stories and visual imagery to be published on national news that night. I was also responsible for briefing senior officers on talking points for their interviews on camera. With a small team of videographers and photographers, we boarded and disembarked various international ships, helicopters, Zodiac boats, and other watercraft to speak to the people participating in the exercise to get the best story of photos for defence media. Sounds like an awesome job, Helen, by the way. Much better than sitting behind a desk all day. In the lecture theatre, the captain continued his introduction to the debrief phase of the exercise by showing an amusing short video of cowboys herding cats before delving into the main presentation and inviting other people to the stage to present their findings. The debrief took several hours, but the individual navies and teams who participated in the exercise had already had their debriefs and slowly closed their teams down. This was the last gathering before the big goodbye barbecue. People were now looking forward to the beginning of a new week. Some were going back home to loved ones. Others were posted to a new ship or a new shore role. Others, like me, were going back to their real life in the corporate world. That's when the tiredness and exhaustion descended on me, but there was something else too. There was a feeling of sadness and mourning, an ending. My life for 1 week was put on hold, as all my time, energy, and focus centered on contributing to and participating in this team effort. The people who were part of the exercise made it, and over the long days and nights, it made some great friendships and rekindled some old ones. There were some tough times when I was mentally and physically exhausted, wondering why I had accepted such a challenge and cursing myself for doing so. However, there were also other times, such as the quiet early morning conversations over a hot brew with the pilot in the Hello Ops Center on the flight deck, that made it worthwhile. Being part of this exercise made me realize the importance of teamwork. Sitting in the lecture theatre with my peers from around the world made me realize that teams, sadly, have an end date, an expiry, and ending. And all of your project teams, or all of your teams that you kind of establish for short periods of time in your organization, go through the same thing. May not be as obvious as a Navy exercise going for a week, but every single one of these things has a natural conclusion that it comes to. And if we're using Microsoft Teams as the vehicle to keep that team connected, obviously there's some rituals or things we need to go through to make sure we make the most of that closure and can move on from it as well. Back in 1965, Bruce Tuckman developed one of the most well-known and influential models of group development. You may know it as the forming, storming, norming, and performing model. Some 10 years later, he added a fifth stage called adjourning. In my experience, this final stage is usually incomplete or not concluded at all. In fact, I struggle to think of any time during my corporate career that any focus or attention was placed onto this phase. Too often, we were assigned to the next project to start the life cycle all over again. Adjourning your project must have the same level of interest as the other phases. As your team's project comes to an end, your team members will experience a sense of loss, and it's important to recognize this feeling and end the project on a positive note. It's time to celebrate the hard work of people in the team and the lessons learned, and to reflect on what could be improved in the future. It's also a time to consider and finalize what happens to all the content sitting within your channels of your team. Should you keep it visible? Should you archive it? Should you upload it to your records management system? This is the last phase of the 10 Ps framework, in which you consider your team's perishability. Coming to the end of your team lifecycle. Contrary to belief, it's best to start with the end in mind. Rather than wait until your team has run its course and then make decisions, we recommend that you consider this phase up front and early on in your implementation. Why? Well, many of your team members will have been reassigned to new projects, and the focus and attention will be drawn away into new and more exciting teams. It's easier to determine and decide the rules and actions that your team will need. Get my sentence out right. Sorry. It is easier to determine and decide the rules and actions that your team needs to close out your team well before the end. This is where you decide what the end of your team's life looks like, and it's a great starting point. Some of the questions you'll need to decide as a team are: when do we determine that the team has run its course, and what does this look like? For example, is it an end date, an action, an activity, or simply no additional conversations being added to it? How will we capture the lessons learned from our teamwork so they can be shared, reused, and shared with others in our organization who may need these to consider for their own teams and projects? Who needs to know that the team will be closing? For example, stakeholders, managers, leaders across the business, and will they be required to have access to any information or content within it? How will we share and communicate the closure of our team to others? What will happen to the content, data, and information held within the team? Are there any specific expiration and retention policies we will need to follow? How will we determine when we need to archive a team versus delete a team? Critical reflection in the workplace. Rig and Trehan in 2008 argue in Critical Reflection in the Workplace, Is It Just Too Difficult? The reflection has been criticized by workplaces in the past for being too individualized and focused on personal growth and development. Organizations must consider what they term critical reflection as the process by which adults identify the assumptions governing their actions, locate the historical and cultural origins of the assumptions, question the meaning of the assumptions, and develop alternative ways of acting. Critical reflection as a team allows us to translate and interpret the way that our team work together to create new knowledge, behaviors, and actions from ordinary and extraordinary experiences. So, how can you do this for your team? Well, first, let's create a lessons learned channel in our team. Where appropriate, we recommend setting up a channel in your team to capture moments that could be used as potential learning experiences and to encourage everyone to capture those as they happen and not wait to the end. This could be situations where the team faltered, a goal failed to be achieved, the team had some difficulty, or was challenged in some way that created tension. You can even add moments when the team was working well. You can call it anything you like. What I learned today. What have I learned? But the important thing is to encourage everyone to share their lessons and then conduct a team debrief or review these at the end of your project. Now, start that again. An alternative to a lessons learned channel may be to add a Microsoft Forms tab to your general channel. The form can include simple questions that will help you to capture lessons or stories which could be used to aid learning in the future. What questions can you ask during your debrief? Too often, end of project debriefs don't occur. As a result, there may be a missed opportunity for understanding the factors at play and how you can prepare yourself for future team projects. Brookfield in 1988 outlined the following model for conducting critical reflections: assumption analysis, contextual awareness, imaginative speculation, and reflective skepticism. As part of the perishability phase of your team, you will need to consider reflecting on the project and asking some questions that may not have clear answers. Some members may not be comfortable sharing in depth as it may touch on some organizational and cultural aspects of how work is done in the company. Using Brookfield's model, we can apply some questions to ask during this perishability phase, specifically to allow us to learn deep lessons that challenge our assumptions, encourage new knowledge to be assimilated, and build new behaviors for the future. You can ask, where were our team's assumptions of how we worked together and collaborated within that team and as a team? What was our team's awareness of the context in which we were working, the environment, resources, conditions, operations, culture, sensitivities? Excuse me. How could we imagine and speculate on a new way of working and thinking so that we can challenge our own way of working for the next team project? How can we question everything above so that we can draw new insights and perspectives from the trends and patterns we saw? Capture personal reflections and stories. When employees complete their teamwork projects or move on to others in the organization, or if they leave their employment, the cost of lost knowledge to the organization can be immense. The corporate knowledge to which we are referring is an employee's tacit knowledge. That is the knowledge that resides in your employees' heads, which can be defined as skills and experiences that people have but are not codified and may not necessarily be expressed. Tacit knowledge can be described in different ways. Knowing how to do something rather than knowing what. Expressing and interacting in different ways. Learning through observation, role modeling, and practice. Acquiring knowledge through experimentation and experience, or learning by intuition. One of the ways to capture the tacit knowledge that sits in the heads of your team members is to capture their stories and experiences of working in that team. This way, the tacit knowledge becomes explicit and is written down or expressed in some form through which it can be transferred to others. You're probably thinking here going, we're going right into knowledge management land or learning and development land. We're not actually talking much about teams at the moment, but this is one of those interesting things where the infrastructure part isn't probably the most important part when it comes to capturing the value out of a team and taking those lessons moving forward. It's really about the people that are involved in that team, involved in that project, involved in that initiative that you created the team for. Making sure we can take the best bits of knowledge out of their heads and out of their experience and what we put into the team and apply that to new stuff in the future. So what are some ways to capture the knowledge of your team members? Excuse me, 1 second. Oh. No, it's very entertaining watching someone cough and have a drink of water on a live stream. I apologize for that. My voice is starting to go. All right, what are some ways to capture the knowledge of your team members? Luckily, within the various Microsoft suite of products, there are a multitude of ways to capture the knowledge of your team members. We'll provide some examples to get you started and get you thinking about how to use those stories of team members to share success with others within the team, other employees in the company, and other people outside your organization. This process is what you may already understand as using the inner and outer loop to share information. Capturing knowledge within the team, so your inner loop, or the people that you work with regularly. The inner loop refers to the knowledge that is captured by team members for team members. You can capture this in various ways. You can record all virtual team meetings within relevant channels so they are accessible to others when needed. Use the chat for the team to capture ideas as they occur and to ensure that conversation keeps going along after the meeting. Just one quick comment there. Since we published the book, Microsoft have made some changes in terms of how recordings get saved within Microsoft Teams. So if you ever recorded a meeting before, you may have noticed they ended up in Stream, which was like your private corporate YouTube, which is locked down just to people in your organization. Probably about 9 or 10 months ago now, Microsoft made the change to have those meeting recordings start to appear in SharePoint or in OneDrive, depending on where you start the meeting recording or where you start the meeting from. So just be conscious there's been a slight change in how it handles those recordings. What that does mean is that the recording itself will be in the team, associated really closely with the team. It'll be in the SharePoint storage behind the team. So it kind of all sits together with all the rest of the content and knowledge that you have in there. So from a perishability point of view, actually makes our life a lot easier as well to have it all together in one spot. Create the week that was, a summary of key team project and learning outcomes that happened in that week. That could be posted into the general channel to consolidate all the key activities that occurred across the team that week. Create a big questions or a what is broken channel in your team, where big ideas, hairy questions, or issues that require more time for collective reflection and planning are posted. This way, the conversation around these cannot be lost within the main conversation. Encourage your team members to capture their thoughts in other ways, such as writing blog posts or creating video updates of what they are doing. Encourage your team members to update their Yammer profiles or profiles they have across their digital workplace with any new skills, capabilities, or experiences they've picked up along the way on the project, as this will build upon their career development and project expertise. Once this knowledge is captured, it will be specific to that team and project. When the time comes to archive this team according to your IT policy, this is where you will need to have a more long-term view of how that knowledge will be shared. This is where your post-team debrief will come into play. You will use these stories and key lessons learned during the debrief to create stories that will be shared to the outer loop, the rest of your organization. That is, by moving these lessons to the outer loop, you ensure that these stories are discoverable by others across your business. Sharing your knowledge to the outer loop. This is where you can be creative in sharing key lessons and success stories through different methods and media across your organization. Use the various Microsoft 365 products at your fingertips to present information in different ways. For example, create a Today I Learned community in Yammer. Encourage your team members to share their aha moments in the community for others to view and learn from. Why not include a specific hashtag for your project so these stories are discoverable? Share a news article outlining your key lessons on a SharePoint communication site. You can document and synthesize what you learned into a formal article that others can learn from in the future. Create a co-created video of your team's reflections of working on that team and share it in Stream, Yammer, or on your internet or in SharePoint. Encourage your conversations by asking others for their input. Capture key lessons as part of the slideshow presentation on PowerPoint and share it on Yammer or whatever platform you want to share it on. Encourage team members to be speakers at organizational or internal department team events such as team meetings, project briefings, or departmental or committee meetings. This one's really important, particularly if you're rolling out Microsoft Teams. You want to get more people in your organization across how to get the most out of Microsoft Teams. If you have people in the business, or if you yourself or your team are using Teams really well to get great business outcomes, make sure you take advantage of getting in front of your peers and other forums that might exist, like leadership forums, management meetings, and things like that, and share your story of success with others. You don't need to get into the minutiae of how you use Teams specifically to do things, but talk about the kinds of work that you did within Microsoft Teams, how that helped you improve your internal customer outcomes or external customer outcomes, how it helped you achieve your KPIs by rethinking how you do work. Because if you can share that knowledge with other people, then more likely more and more people in your business will be able to kind of experience the same thing. And we get some consistency in the way that people apply Teams to their teamwork as well. Conduct an hour of power in which you may have any one of your team members can conduct an hour-long webinar with an open invitation across the organization on a skill, experience, or lesson learned during the teamwork collaboration. This is what is known as social learning, people learning from each other and with each other. There are many more ways to share lessons learned and success stories, and we encourage you to be creative here, as you're the best person to know how your organization will receive and value this information. But what about people and networks outside of your company? Think of this as an open network, everything that sits outside your organization's walls. So sharing your knowledge outside your organization. Assuming there is nothing private, sensitive, or confidential to share, such as customer names or details, and details. This is where we interact with our peers from the same or even different industries. This type of sharing is for building networks, having conversations, and sharing insights. Some organizations may have strict guidelines regarding their employees sharing information to social networks, so we encourage you to find out what these are and abide by them. Here are some ways in which you can share what you learned on your project to people outside your organization. You put together some blog posts, like a reflective blog post to share that you and share to your social networks, or write a collaborative team blog post about your experiences. If you're on Twitter, you could share some tweets about key lessons learned using a specific hashtag, or create a tweet chat where you can encourage others from your network to share their lessons learned and from similar projects. Or you could write some articles, like writing an article that can be shared on your website, your corporate website from a marketing point of view or employer branding point of view. Pitch an article to a corporate newsletter or trade magazine. LinkedIn, there's lots of options here. Share your key lessons learned in LinkedIn posts or write a LinkedIn article. Update your LinkedIn profile with any skills, experiences, projects, and capabilities learned on the project. Do a LinkedIn live video with the key team members and have them share key points of the project, what they could do differently, or create an infographic of tips and tricks learned that you could share freely to start conversations. From a video point of view, create a video of key lessons to share on your preferred social network, create a story around your project that you can present at industry conferences or events, or conduct a behind-the-scenes video tour and interviews with all the team members to ascertain what they learned. That last one there is actually really interesting and easy one to do. Just like simply pull out your mobile phone and just do little interviews with people if you're there face-to-face, or crack open your webcam like this, get into a Teams meeting and just have a reflection and chat about what you actually achieved as a team. And then presentations-wise, you could create a slideshare presentation of what you learned on the team as well. Now, the key thing here that in hindsight with this chapter, we saw a little bit going to chapter, but the key thing here in hindsight that we wish we had put more into this chapter is a little bit more guidance around how to deal with the actual information or structured information, documents, spreadsheets, things like that that are in the team when you finish with it. Excuse me. There are some teams where that kind of information you just don't care about and you're never going to use it again. So in that situation, it might make perfect sense just to delete the team when you're finished with the team, and that's how the end of life of that team will occur. There are other scenarios where that information might be really valuable, though. So, for example, if you're at a university and you're running, graduate like your O week, orientation week, we have new students coming in every week. Every year or every semester. That team might only be active for maybe 5 or 6 weeks every year because it's just around that orientation week timeframe. But that information is going to be really valuable in 12 months' time when you want to run O week again, right? So thinking about that information, the value of information, you might think about, well, actually, we don't want to delete that team because we want to refer back to it next time we have O week. So you might archive that team instead. Archiving the team makes it all read-only, so no one can add any content to the chats or anything like that. And we can still access those files if we need to access them in the future. As a team owner, you can still give people, add people to the team, remove people from the team to give them access to that read-only information, but there's going to be no new knowledge created there. So that's a good middle ground if you just want to have access to that information or that knowledge without having to, without deleting it or potentially losing it as well, or keeping it open, thinking people are going to continue to be overwhelmed by this collaboration space that you have there as well. There's plenty more we could probably talk about around that information management side of things. I think the key thing here, if you're in a role that isn't in IT or isn't in records management, and you want to have a discussion about this, go and talk to your IT team or information management team. Ask them about what controls they're putting in place in terms of information retention and archiving and things like that. You may find that in your organization, there are some default policies that mean that a team will get deleted after 2 years of no activity, when it's actually some really valuable knowledge you want to keep longer than that. So it's always good to just be aware of those rules that might have been put in place and potentially be able to influence them or get exceptions to them if you need them for particular business purposes as well. All right, let's get back to the book. So at the end of the team, I kind of started sharing the knowledge out of the team, which is great. So now it's time to celebrate. By now you're probably thinking that to wind down a team, it seems like there's more work. And that's true to some extent. So let's turn our attention to what you really want to read about, the celebration. As mentioned, the adjournment of a team means some form of goodbye, so that team members can bring some closure to their work and the bonds created in the team. Celebrating the team can be done in any way, and really you're going to be the experts here. You don't need us to tell you this. It's likely that you probably already talked about what this may be, such as a lunch at a nearby pizza restaurant or a morning tea, and yes, you can even do those virtually. Regardless of how you choose to celebrate the team's close, there's still one or two tasks left to finish. One quick thing about celebration. We actually wrapped up during COVID. We did a 6-month project with a customer where not once did any member of the Adopt and Embrace team meet face to face with a member of this customer. And the best part of that whole project, it was a really well run project, and the customer did an amazing job, and our team did a great job as well. Got a really good outcome for them. But the best part, or the most memorable part of the project, was sitting there at the end with the last team meeting, where basically when we're shutting everything down, and having all the customer team members, all our team members on the call, just reflecting on what we achieved over the last 6 months, and sharing that over a cup of tea, virtually using a Teams meeting to do that. So make sure you take the moments when you have them to kind of connect with people together. And we didn't really talk about work; we just talked about the best bits, the highs and the lows, and things like that, and kind of brought everything to a nice closure, which was great to do. All right, so last little bit of this chapter. You've conducted your debriefs, you've shared your lessons and stories with the organization and the world, you've had your goodbye lunch and reflected on how this teamwork collaboration has supported you in your role, and you're looking forward to the next team project. What's left to be done? Here, the team owners and IT administrators are responsible for deciding how to archive and store the team information. Your IT and records management team may have specific policies around what happens to teams at the end of their project lifecycle. They may archive the team or they may delete it. Important, in big capital letters in the book, deleting a team will mean that all associated channels, files, and chats are deleted. You will never be able to access any information within this team again. The alternative is the alternative is to archive a team. Archiving means that all activity in that team will cease. However, you and your team owners will still be able to add or remove members and update roles. You can also choose to make the team read-only in SharePoint as another option. In future, if you need to unarchive the team, you can do so, and you will have the team back up and running again. And the best part about this is you don't actually need to have IT involved to do that. The team owner can archive and unarchive the team if they want to. This is particularly handy if you run events every year and you want to refer back to what you did last year or the year before. We encourage you to archive your team first at the end of your project to ensure that no information is lost. This way, should you need it again, it can be reactivated. Remember, if you delete your team, all information will be lost. Speak to your IT or records management team regarding the best action here, as they may have archival and retention policies that you're not aware of. So in summary, the perishability of a team is a principle that is just as critical as others in the framework when it comes to determining the structure of your team. Consider it not as an ending, but as a new beginning for your team members that have contributed and participated in an experience in which they solved a problem together and had an opportunity to learn from and each other in the process. Using Microsoft Teams enables your team members to express their ideas, knowledge, insights, and experiences in different ways and methods using various Microsoft products, tools, and plugins. This, in turn, encourages conversations across their team, department, organization, and maybe even the world. Don't think of your team's perishability like herding cats, as the Navy officer did at the beginning of this chapter. It might have been like this in the days of email and email threads, but with Microsoft Teams, you now have an opportunity to capture the unique insights and experiences of your team members, and these will have a direct and positive impact not only on the individual, but also on your organization itself. The key takeaways from this chapter: capture the personal stories and key lessons learned in a number of different ways so that they can be shared to your organization, customers, and stakeholders. Decide how you will archive information and files in Teams. You may need to seek advice from your IT department or someone involved with how information is stored and managed in your organization. And remember to celebrate. Your end of chapter checklist: document how you will capture and share your lessons learned from your team in your 10 piece workbook. And if you haven't already, it's time to create your team. And that's it. That's the end of part 2 of Adopt and Embrace Microsoft Teams. We've gone through all of the 10 Ps now across the last, I think, 4 or 5 live stream sessions. We've got through all those 10 Ps. Again, just to recap those 10 Ps, if you've kind of just joined in halfway through the live streams, 10 Ps is basically a framework that we recommend to help you design the perfect team for whatever collaboration or coordination experience you want to create within your organization using Microsoft Teams. It helps us decide when is the right time to create a team, how many teams is the right number of teams for the task at hand or the project at hand or whatever we're doing at hand, who should be involved, what channel structure we should have, et cetera, et cetera. So it helps us kind of navigate all those really important questions. If you want to learn more about the 10 Ps, obviously they're written in the book, in the chapters that we've just read through. If you want to go back on the live streams in this playlist, you'll see us kind of cover all those different 10 Ps there. If you want kind of a short abridged version of me walking through the 10 Ps, if you're on YouTube, which you are if you're watching this, go to YouTube and just search for 10 Ps Microsoft Teams. And there's been 4 or 5 presentations I've delivered at virtual events around the world, where I kind of, in about 45 minutes, go through the 10 Ps in a bit more detail and show you how to work through that workbook and things like that as well. So with that, let's look forward to the next live stream. I'm sure it's not going to be a 6-week gap between live streams like it has been. I'm not planning to move house again anytime soon, thankfully. So from now on, we're going to go into part 3, which is patterns from the real world. And this is where we go through some examples of how you can structure teams using the 10 Ps framework to put the team in place. So the first one is, for example, is an expert community of practice. How can we use Microsoft Teams to structure a space where we can get experts around our business across different teams, but maybe similar roles to connect together to solve real problems for our organization? And each of those chapters, we kind of have outlined for each of the 10 Ps. So you can see the problem we've listed there, purpose, people, priorities, etc. So you'll get a real feel for how we can apply the 10 Ps in the business to structure a team based on around a real world design that we have here. So we'll probably do a couple of those every live stream for the next few weeks. So next time we'll look at expert community of practice. We'll look at the graduate induction and onboarding for people joining your organization. And again, we'll kind of show you how you can structure teamwork to happen within Microsoft Teams as well, with some real world examples. So with that, thank you once again for joining in, the few people that joined live. For those of you that are watching the replay, thanks again for watching. If you want more content like this, not only just the book reads, but other content we produce here at Adopt and Embrace, make sure you subscribe to the Adopt and Embrace YouTube channel. If you enjoyed the content, got value out of the content today, we'd also appreciate a like, obviously. This helps with the algorithms in YouTube so people can discover this kind of content as well that are looking for it too. So with that, thank you once again. Thank you for putting up with my raspy voice once again today. And we'll see you next time we do a live stream on the Adopt and Embrace channel. Catch you next time. Bye.